When my daughter told me to sleep on the couch because her golden retriever needed my bed, I didn't tell her I still owned the house. 3 days later, she was standing on the sidewalk with her suitcases, begging me to let her back in. But the locks had already been changed. My name is Diane Morrison, and I'm 62 years old. I taught 4th grade for 37 years before retiring last spring with a pension that would keep me comfortable for the rest of my life. My husband Frank died 2 years ago from a massive heart attack at 64, leaving me our beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in Sacramento and enough savings to live without worry. What he didn't leave me was the wisdom to see what my own daughter would become when faced with desperation and entitlement. It started innocently enough, the way most family disasters do. My daughter Haley, 29 years old and married for 3 years, suffered a devastating miscarriage in October. She'd been trying for a baby with her husband Trent for 2 long years, enduring fertility treatments, hormone shots, and the monthly disappointment of negative pregnancy tests. When she finally got pregnant, we were all thrilled. When she lost the baby at 12 weeks, it crushed her completely. As any mother would do, I dropped everything. I packed a suitcase with enough clothes for a week, filled my car with groceries and homemade casseroles, and drove the 45 minutes to their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a questionable part of town to help however I could. "Mom, you really don't have to stay," Haley said through her tears that first evening, but I could see in her hollow eyes that she desperately needed me. Her normally bright smile was gone, replaced by the vacant stare of someone who'd lost everything that mattered. I cooked her favorite meals from childhood: chicken and dumplings, homemade mac and cheese, chocolate chip cookies that filled their tiny kitchen with warmth. I cleaned their messy apartment, scrubbing dishes that had sat in the sink for days and folding laundry that had been piling up since the miscarriage. Most importantly, I held her when she cried, which was often and without warning. Trent, her 31-year-old husband, seemed grateful for the help at first. He worked in tech support at a downtown company and came home exhausted each evening to find his wife fed and the apartment clean. "Thank you, Diane," he'd say with that overly polite smile he always wore around me. "You're a lifesaver." But something about Trent had always rubbed me wrong. Maybe it was how he never quite looked me in the eye when he spoke, or how he had a different story every time someone asked about his job history. Frank had noticed it too before he died. "That boy's got shifty eyes," he'd said after their wedding. "Watch him around money." After 3 weeks of me sleeping on their uncomfortable futon and tiptoeing around their grief, Trent suggested something that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. "Diane, you know, your house has so much more space than this cramped place," he said one evening over dinner. "Maybe we should all stay there while Haley recovers. It might be good for her to have a change of scenery, be back in her childhood home." The idea made perfect sense. My 4-bedroom house had been echoing with loneliness since Frank died, and Haley had grown up in those rooms. Her old bedroom still had her high school trophies on the shelves and the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Frank had helped her put up when she was 12. Maybe being surrounded by happier memories would help her heal. "Of course," I said immediately. "Stay as long as you need, forever if it helps." Those were the words that would come back to haunt me. Forever. That was my first mistake, though I wouldn't realize it for months. We moved into my house the next day. I gave them the master bedroom without hesitation, thinking they needed the privacy and comfort during this difficult time. The room had a king-size bed, a walk-in closet, and an ensuite bathroom with a garden tub where Haley could soak away her sadness. I moved my clothes and personal items into the guest room down the hall, telling myself it was temporary, just until Haley felt stronger. Their golden retriever, Mochi, came with them, of course. The dog was 3 years old, pampered beyond belief, and had become their baby substitute after years of failed pregnancy attempts. I understood that. Mochi was beautiful, with thick golden fur and intelligent brown eyes, and he clearly adored Haley. If having him around brought her comfort, I was happy to have him in my home. What I didn't understand was how quickly everything would change once they settled in. Within the first week, Trent was rearranging my living room furniture. "This flows better for entertaining," he said, pushing my antique coffee table, a piece Frank and I had bought on our honeymoon in North Carolina, into the corner behind the couch. "Don't you think it opens up the space?" Haley nodded along enthusiastically, seemingly emerging from her grief by taking control of my space. "Oh yes, Mom. It looks so much more modern this way." I wanted to object, but she looked happier than she had in weeks. If rearranging furniture helped her heal, I could live with it. "Mom, do you mind if we put some of your things in storage?" Haley asked one morning about 2 weeks later. "The house feels so cluttered with all these knickknacks everywhere." The knickknacks were Frank's photography awards from his 30-year career as a freelance photographer, my teaching recognition plaques from the school district, and the ceramic figurine collection I'd been building for 20 years. Each piece had a story, a memory attached to it. But Haley was still fragile, and I wanted to do everything possible to help her recover from her loss. "Whatever makes you comfortable, honey," I said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. Boxes of my life disappeared into the garage. Photos of Frank and me from our travels, my certificate of recognition for Teacher of the Year, the little ceramic owl that had been my first purchase as a newlywed. All of it vanished into cardboard containers stacked between holiday decorations and old tax records. By December, just 2 months after they'd moved in, I barely recognized my own home. They'd repainted the dining room from the warm yellow Frank and I had chosen to a stark gray without asking my permission. They'd replaced my floral curtains, the ones I'd sewn myself during my first year of marriage, with modern white blinds that made the rooms feel cold and institutional. Somehow my name had even vanished from the mailbox, replaced with a neat label that read, "The Morrison Family." When I mentioned the mailbox change, Trent shrugged with that infuriating smile. "The mailman knows who lives here, Diane. It's not like we're hiding anything." But it felt like they were erasing me, piece by piece, from my own life. The real blow came on a cold Tuesday night in January. I'd been working late at the community center, volunteering for the adult literacy program, something I'd started after retiring to keep myself busy. I came home exhausted after helping 3 different students work through their reading assignments. All I wanted was to sink into my comfortable bed with a cup of tea and the mystery novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom and opened the door to find Mochi sprawled across my side of the bed, his thick golden fur covering my pillow completely. His leash and collar were draped over my nightstand, and his favorite rope toy lay where I usually kept my reading glasses. Haley was in the ensuite bathroom, brushing her teeth before bed. I could hear the electric toothbrush humming. "Haley, can you move Mochi, please? I'm really tired and I'd like to go to bed." She appeared in the doorway, toothbrush foam around her mouth, looking at me like I'd asked her to move a mountain. "Mom, he's been having really bad anxiety since we moved here. The vet said he needs consistency and routine. Just sleep on the couch tonight, okay? He's super sensitive to changes in his environment." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Sleep on the couch? In my own house?" "It's just one night. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mom. We're all adjusting here." Trent appeared behind her, already in his pajamas. "Diane, come on." Mochi's finally sleeping through the night again. Moving him now would set back his progress by weeks. His progress? What about my progress? I've been giving up everything for months to help you both. "And we appreciate it," Haley said in that patronizing tone she'd been using more and more lately. "But this is about healing, for all of us." But it wasn't just one night. It became 2 nights, then 3, then a full week. Every time I tried to reclaim my bed, there was a new excuse. Mochi was stressed from the weather change. The dog was experiencing separation anxiety. Mochi was sick and needed to sleep elevated for his breathing. Mochi had claimed the bed as his territory, and moving him would cause serious behavioral problems that could cost thousands in training to fix. The dog trainer said displacement trauma could cause him to become aggressive, Trent explained when I protested on the 4th night. "Do you really want to risk that?" I found myself living on my own couch like an unwelcome guest in a home I'd been paying for since before Haley was born. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in February. I was making breakfast, scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, and fresh biscuits from scratch, the same meal I'd been preparing for my family for 30 years, when Haley appeared in the kitchen carrying a piece of paper like it was a royal decree. "What's this?" I asked, wiping flour from my hands on the apron Frank had given me for our 20th anniversary. It's a chore list. Trent and I talked about it last night, and we thought it would help organize things around here. You know, so everyone knows what their responsibilities are and we can maintain some structure. I read the list in complete disbelief. Clean all bathrooms weekly, including scrubbing grout and replacing toilet paper. Vacuum upstairs and downstairs, including under all furniture. Wash, dry, fold, and put away all laundry for the household. Wash dishes after every meal and maintain clean kitchen. Complete grocery shopping and meal planning for family meals. Take out trash and recycling on collection days. Maintain yard work including mowing, weeding, and seasonal cleanup. Deep clean refrigerator monthly. Dust all surfaces and baseboards weekly. Every single item was assigned to me. Not one responsibility belonged to either of them. I'm not your housekeeper, Haley, I said, my voice shaking with anger I'd been suppressing for months. You're not contributing anything else, she snapped back, her grief apparently not too overwhelming to prevent her from being cruel. Trent and I are paying for everything now. The mortgage, utilities, groceries, everything. The least you can do is help maintain the house. That was a complete lie, and we all knew it. I was still paying the property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and all the utilities. The mortgage had been paid off 5 years earlier, when Frank used his inheritance from his father to eliminate our debt. But somehow, they'd convinced themselves, or at least they were trying to convince me, that they were supporting me financially. That's not true, Haley, and you know it. Mom, you're living here rent-free, Trent said, appearing in the kitchen doorway like he'd been waiting for his cue. In most families, that comes with expectations. Rent-free? This is my house. Legally, maybe, Haley said with a shrug that broke my heart. But we're the ones building a life here now. The humiliation deepened with each passing day. They began hosting dinner parties where I was introduced as Haley's mom who helps around the house, instead of the woman who owned the house they were entertaining in. I would spend hours cooking elaborate meals for their friends, only to be relegated to eating in the kitchen while they occupied the dining room table I'd bought with my first teaching paycheck. Mom, could you refill the water glasses? Haley would call out during these gatherings, treating me like waitstaff in front of people I'd never met. When my 62nd birthday arrived in March, I woke up expecting at least a card or acknowledgement. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Mom, running errands all day, leftovers in fridge, happy birthday. Welcome. That same evening, Mochi got an elaborate birthday celebration for turning 4. They invited a dozen people over, had a custom cake made from the fancy pet bakery downtown, bought him 3 new toys, and took dozens of photos that they immediately posted on social media with captions like, "Our baby is growing up." I got a message at 9 p.m. that said, "Happy birthday, Mom," with a generic cake emoji. I was becoming invisible in my own life, and worse, I was letting it happen. One evening in late March, Linda Peterson came by for what we'd scheduled as a casual coffee visit. Linda had been my teaching colleague for 15 years before we both retired, and she'd remained my closest friend through Frank's death and my adjustment to widowhood. She looked around at my transformed house with increasingly worried eyes. "Diane, honey, this isn't right," she said, settling into what used to be my favorite reading chair, but was now positioned awkwardly near the window because of Trent's better flow arrangement. "You're being treated like hired help in your own home." "Haley's been through so much with the miscarriage," I said automatically, the excuse I'd been using for months like a broken record. "I just want to help her get through this difficult time." "By letting them erase you completely? Diane, where are your family photos? Your collections? That beautiful wedding quilt your mother spent 2 years making you?" I couldn't answer because I honestly didn't know where most of my possessions were anymore. They'd been boxed up and stored so long ago that I'd stopped thinking about them. Linda's expression hardened in a way I'd only seen when she dealt with particularly difficult parents during our teaching days. "Diane, have you looked at your property deed recently?" The question hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I hadn't thought about the deed in years, not since Frank died and the lawyer had handled transferring everything to my name. Frank and I had bought the house 23 years ago when Haley was 6 years old, using his Army veteran benefits and my teacher's savings for the down payment. After his death, everything had been properly transferred to me as the surviving spouse. But surely if Haley and Trent were taking over all the household responsibilities and treating the place like their own, we would have discussed changing the ownership. Why would I need to look at the deed? I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. Because, sweetheart, I think you need to remind yourself who actually owns this house before you let them convince you otherwise. That night, while Haley and Trent were at the movies watching some violent action film I had no interest in, I searched through my filing cabinet in the guest room closet. It took me 20 minutes to find the folder marked House Documents, buried under files of tax returns and insurance policies I'd been meaning to organize. There it was, as clear as the day Frank and I had signed it with trembling hands and dreams of building a family. The property deed listing Diane Marie Morrison as the sole owner. Not a single mention of Haley Morrison or Trent Davidson anywhere on the legal document. My hands shook as the full reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. They weren't paying the mortgage because there wasn't one. Frank and I had paid it off completely in 2020 using his father's inheritance. They weren't paying rent because we'd never discussed any rental arrangement. They weren't supporting me financially in any way. In fact, I was still paying for everything. Property taxes that cost me $8,000 annually, homeowner's insurance, all utilities, groceries for 3 adults, and maintenance, just like I had for the past 23 years. I was paying for the privilege of being treated like a servant in my own home, but there was something else in that file that made my blood run cold. A letter from the county assessor dated just 2 weeks earlier, addressed to Haley and Trent Morrison, about a property tax assessment. They were already trying to establish themselves as the legal residents for tax purposes. The next morning, I called Linda before I lost my nerve. "I found the deed," I said without preamble when she answered her phone. "The house is still in my name only. But Linda, there's more. They're trying to get mail from the county addressed to them about the property taxes." "Thank God you found that deed," Linda said with obvious relief. "But Diane, this is serious. They're not just taking advantage. They're potentially setting up to steal your house." "Surely they wouldn't." "Haley chose to kick her mother out of her own bed for a dog," Linda interrupted firmly. "What makes you think she'd draw the line at stealing your house?" Linda was right, but I needed professional advice before I did anything that might permanently damage my relationship with my only child. She gave me the phone number for attorney Sarah Levin, who specialized in property law and had helped Linda's sister with a similar family situation the year before. "Call her today," Linda insisted. "Don't wait another day." Attorney Levin's office was in a gleaming downtown building that smelled like expensive leather and quiet confidence. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an immaculate navy suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. "Tell me exactly what's happening, Mrs. Morrison," she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad and an expensive-looking pen. I explained everything, the miscarriage that had started it all, the move that was supposed to be temporary, the gradual takeover of my home, the chore lists, the erasure of my possessions, sleeping on the couch while a dog occupied my bed, and now the suspicious mail from the county. She took detailed notes and asked pointed questions about timelines and financial arrangements. "Do you have the property deed with you?" I handed over the document I'd carried in my purse like a talisman since finding it. She studied it carefully, her expression growing more serious with each line she read. "This is absolutely straightforward," she said finally. "You are the sole legal owner of this property. If your daughter and son-in-law are living there without a formal rental agreement and are refusing to acknowledge your authority in your own home, we can legally treat them as trespassers." Trespassers? The word felt too harsh for family. "They're my daughter and son-in-law. Mrs. Morrison, family relationships don't override property law." "How long has this situation been going on?" 4 months now. "Have they paid you any rent during this time?" "No." "Have they contributed to property taxes, insurance, utilities, or home maintenance?" "No." "I've been paying for everything." "Have they made any attempts to establish legal residency or ownership?" I showed her the letter from the county assessor. Her expression darkened. This is concerning. They're attempting to establish a paper trail that could eventually support an adverse possession claim or at minimum complicate your ownership. Attorney Levin leaned back in her leather chair, her expression sympathetic but firm. Mrs. Morrison, you have every legal right to reclaim your home. We can start with a formal notice to quit, giving them 30 days to vacate the premises. If they refuse to leave after that period, we can proceed with formal eviction proceedings. The word eviction made my stomach turn violently. Isn't there some other way? Some compromise we could reach? You could continue to allow them to live there and formalize a rental agreement with specific terms about respect and boundaries. You could sell the house entirely and force them to find other arrangements. Or you could continue sleeping on your couch while they treat you like unwanted help and potentially steal your house. She was absolutely right, and we both knew it. I'd been treating my daughter like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, but legally, that's exactly what she was. What do I need to do? I'll draft the official notice today. Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask, are you prepared for their reaction? This won't be pleasant. I thought about Mochi sleeping in my bed while I developed back pain from the couch. I thought about being introduced as the mom who helps around the house to people eating food I'd cooked in my own dining room. I thought about the birthday celebration I never got while a dog received gifts and cake. I thought about the county assessor letter and what it might mean for my future. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. I'm ready. 2 days later, while they were both at work, Haley had started a part-time job at a boutique and Trent was at his tech support job. I taped the official 30-day notice to quit to the front door with trembling hands. The legal document was formal and intimidating, with official seals and language about unlawful detainer actions and legal eviction proceedings. I signed it with my full legal name and dated it, then drove to Linda's house to wait for the inevitable phone call. My phone started ringing exactly 27 minutes later. Mom, what the hell is this notice on our door? Haley's voice was shrill with panic and anger. It's exactly what it says, Haley. You have 30 days to find other living arrangements. You can't kick us out. This is our home too. We live here. No, Haley, it's not your home. It's my home. You've made that abundantly clear by treating me like an unwelcome servant in it. We never treated you like a servant. We treat you like family. Family doesn't sleep on couches while dogs take their beds. Family doesn't get handed chore lists like hired help. When was the last time you asked how I was feeling instead of telling me what chores needed to be done? There was silence on the line, then the sound of crying. Trent grabbed the phone. Diane, you're being completely unreasonable here. We can work this out like adults. The time for working things out ended when you decided my bed belonged to your dog and I belonged on the couch. Look, we'll pay rent. We'll contribute more to the household expenses. It's too late for that, Trent. But Haley's still recovering from her loss. She needs stability right now. Haley recovered enough to throw dinner parties and redecorate my house without permission. She'll recover enough to find somewhere else to live. I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. They came home an hour later, both of them crying and shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I watched from Linda's kitchen window as they read the notice again and again, as if the words might somehow change if they stared at the paper long enough. When I finally returned home that evening, Haley was waiting by the front door with red, swollen eyes and mascara streaks down her cheeks. Mom, you can't do this to us, she pleaded, grabbing my arm. We have nowhere else to go. You had somewhere to go before you moved into my house. You'll figure it out again. But I was grieving. I needed support and comfort, and I gave it to you. I gave you everything I had, including my own dignity and self-respect, but you took far more than I offered. Trent tried a different approach, speaking in the reasonable tone he probably used with difficult customers at work. Look, we all know we made some mistakes here. Let's sit down like a family and figure out a fair arrangement that works for everyone. The fair arrangement was me helping you heal while you respected that this is my home. You chose a completely different arrangement. We'll get rid of the dog, Trent said desperately. We'll find Mochi another home. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Haley looked shocked that he'd suggested sacrificing their beloved pet. "Don't punish Mochi for your choices," I said firmly. "He's innocent in all of this. You created this problem, not him." Over the following week, they tried everything in their emotional manipulation playbook. There were tears at breakfast, screaming matches in the evening, elaborate guilt trips that lasted for hours, and desperate bargaining sessions that kept me awake at night. They promised to pay me rent, to give me back the master bedroom, to treat me with respect, to value my contributions to the household. But I'd hired attorney Levin for good reasons, and she'd given me excellent advice. "Every promise they're making now proves they knew they were treating you wrong before," she'd pointed out during our follow-up meeting. "If they really thought their behavior was acceptable, why are they offering to change it?" But then Haley tried a different tactic that nearly broke my resolve. "Mom, I found something of Dad's that I thought you might want," she said on the Thursday of the second week, appearing in my doorway with a small wooden box I hadn't seen in years. Inside was Frank's class ring from high school, his Army dog tags, and a letter he'd written me during his deployment that I'd treasured for decades. Things that should have been given to me immediately after his death. "Where did you find these?" "They were in the master bedroom closet. I was cleaning and found them in the back." But these weren't items that Frank would have kept in the closet. These were things from his desk drawer, things that had been in his study. She'd been going through his personal belongings without telling me. "Thank you," I said quietly, taking the box. "Mom, I know we've had our differences, but Dad loved this house. He loved our family. Don't you think he'd want us all to be together here?" It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and it almost worked. 2 weeks into the 30-day notice period, I came home from grocery shopping to find a large "for sale" sign planted prominently in my front yard with a red "sold" sticker across it. My heart stopped. I called the phone number on the sign immediately, my hands shaking with rage and fear. "Hi, I'm calling about the house on Maple Street that you have listed as sold. I'm the legal owner of that property, and I didn't authorize this listing or any sale." "Oh my," the realtor said, clearly flustered. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. Mrs. Haley Morrison contacted our office yesterday to list the property as a quick sale. She said she and her husband had inherited it from her late father and needed to sell immediately due to financial difficulties. We had a cash buyer ready to close next week. Her father was my husband, and he didn't leave the house to anyone. I'm the sole owner according to the deed, and I want that sign removed from my property immediately. If there's a sale pending, it needs to be canceled right now." "Of course! I'll send someone out right away and contact the buyer's agent immediately." "I'm terribly sorry about this misunderstanding." Within an hour, a realtor arrived to remove the sign. Haley and Trent pulled into the driveway just as he was loading the wooden post into his truck. "What's happening?" Haley demanded, jumping out of their car. "Why are you taking down our sign?" "I canceled the fraudulent listing you made without my permission," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Attempting to sell property that doesn't belong to you is called fraud, by the way." Trent's face turned an alarming shade of red. "We need to sell this place to have enough money for a deposit somewhere else." "Then sell something you actually own." "Mom, we had a buyer," Haley screamed. "A cash buyer. We could have all gotten money from this." "There is no we in this situation, Haley. This is my house, and you just attempted to steal it." That night, Linda came over with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine to help me process the day's events. "They tried to sell your house behind your back?" she asked, incredulous. "Not just tried. They had a buyer ready to close next week." "Jesus, Diane. They weren't just taking advantage of you. They were planning to steal everything you have. I keep wondering where I went wrong. How did I raise a daughter who could do this to me?" "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people just turn into different versions of themselves when they smell money or feel desperate." The final week of the notice period arrived like an approaching storm. On Monday, I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed while they were at work. It was my legal right after serving proper notice, but seeing those shiny new keys in my hand felt like holding my life back together. On Tuesday, I contacted all the utility companies and had the accounts transferred back to my name only. Somehow, Trent had convinced the electric company that he was the primary resident, but the property deed cleared up that confusion quickly. On Wednesday, Haley made one last desperate attempt to stay. "Mom, I have something important to tell you," she said, appearing at my bedroom door with tears in her eyes and what looked like a pregnancy test in her hand. "I'm pregnant again." I looked at her carefully, searching her face for the truth. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday. I took 3 tests. All positive." "And you didn't think to mention this at any point during the past month while fighting the eviction notice?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Haley, even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. Millions of parents figure out housing situations every day. You'll manage. But we'll be homeless. My baby will be born into homelessness. You'll be somewhere else. That's not the same thing as homeless. And if you're really pregnant, maybe this will motivate you to start acting like responsible adults." Friday arrived like an inevitable storm, moving day. I parked my car across the street at 7 in the morning and watched the whole process unfold. A small U-Haul truck arrived at 8, and I'd arranged to spend the day at the community center, not wanting a final confrontation that might weaken my resolve. But I couldn't resist driving by every few hours to check the progress. By noon, the truck was half loaded. I watched from a distance as Haley carried out box after box of belongings, her face streaked with tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. Trent loaded their modern furniture, the gray paint cans from their unauthorized redecorating project, and all of Mochi's elaborate accessories. The golden retriever sat patiently in the truck's passenger seat, panting happily and completely unaware that his world was changing forever. They made several more trips throughout the afternoon, removing every trace of their temporary residency. The white blinds came down, their clothes disappeared from the closets, and slowly, glimpses of my real home began to emerge from underneath their overlay. At 2 in the afternoon, the moving truck finally pulled away from the curb. Haley and Trent lingered beside their loaded car for nearly 15 minutes, both of them staring back at the house like they were waiting for me to change my mind and come running out to forgive them. I watched from 3 houses down as Haley finally broke down completely, sobbing so hard that Trent had to help her into the passenger seat. But I'd already changed my mind about who I was willing to be. 4 months ago, when I'd given up my bed for a dog. I waited until their car disappeared completely around the corner before driving home. The house felt enormous and strangely quiet after months of their constant presence. My furniture looked sparse and unfamiliar after being rearranged and stored for so long, but it was mine again. I walked through each room slowly, seeing my home with fresh eyes. The master bedroom was exactly as I'd left it the night they'd exiled me to the couch, minus their belongings and the dog hair that would require professional cleaning to remove completely. My bed was waiting for me. That evening I called Linda to report on the day's events. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Empty, but the right kind of empty, if that makes sense." "Perfect sense. Any regrets?" I thought about Haley crying by the car. I thought about potential grandchildren I might never meet if she was really pregnant. I thought about family holiday dinners that would probably never happen again. I thought about Frank and wondered what he would have done in my situation. "Ask me in a year," I said, but I already knew the answer. For the first time in months, I would be sleeping in my own bed, in my own house, following my own rules. Mochi was probably settling into some other couch in some other place with people who had chosen a dog over their family relationships. I'd chosen myself instead, finally. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs as I turned off the lights room by room. Tomorrow, I would start the long process of reclaiming my space completely. I'd retrieve my photos from the garage, my figurines from their boxes, my quilts from storage. I'd repaint the dining room back to the warm yellow that Frank and I had chosen together. I'd replace those cold white blinds with curtains that made the rooms feel like home again. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed for the first time in 4 months. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "Mom, it's Haley. We're staying at a hotel until we find an apartment. I wanted you to know the pregnancy test was negative. I lied because I was desperate. I'm sorry for everything." I hope someday you can forgive me. I read the message 3 times before deleting it. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The couch was theirs. The house was mine.